we want to draw two other panel members to join us. One is Ambassador Cynthia Schneider. She's former U.S. ambassador to the Netherlands, and it's a real privilege to have her with us, and also Mr. Linus Zhao, Executive Vice Chairman of the Asia Pacific Exchange. Linus could also join us. It's an honor to have him with us. Sorry, if he could come and join us here, that would be very good. And we will proceed with the discussion. Please. And many of you, those of you who were here last year, will remember Linus is an outstanding thinker on international affairs, and it's an honor to have someone from China with us. So we have Syria and America and Italy and China all represented in the panel, and our topic of discussion today is, as we go on, is Islamism, the social and cultural solution. And we're talking about education, media, women's empowerment, the role of civil society. But I'm sure the discussion will roam wider than that even. So where should we turn to first? I think Ambassador Schneider?
Sure.
Okay. Cynthia, I'm going to pass you the microphone because we're sharing here.
Okay, no problem. Well, thank you so much. Thank you for inviting me, Ribal. It's great to be here and an honor to be among friends and this very distinguished panel. And I appreciate very much your raising what I think is a really crucial element of this struggle against extremism, which we're all concerned with and which you laid out in such a fascinating, detailed fashion. You know, in the United States, we don't tend always to take culture very seriously in the context of international affairs. Let me just begin by saying there can be no doubt that the extremists do. And we should perhaps, take a hint from that. Why is it that the Taliban destroyed the Bamiyan Buddhas? Why is it that these people go after antiquities, antique sites? Fortunately, in Mosul, fake antiquities. Thank goodness, that was brilliant. But still, why is it that that is one of the first things they do? Why is it that they tried, again, happily unsuccessfully, to destroy the manuscripts in Timbuktu? I think it is because, sure, the revenue is important, but I think it's also this critical issue of identity. Culture is what roots us. It's what gives us a sense of identity. It is what provides us with this humanizing background of acceptance, diversity, plurality, knowledge. If you want to control people with an absolute authoritarian ideology, you have to take all that away and treat them like a blank slate. And so if the extremists take culture so seriously, perhaps we ought to also. And it has happened in the past. If you'll forgive me, Francesco, Monte Cassino was terrible, but after that came The Monuments Men, which you may know from that not very good film, hopefully the better book. But this was actually a very inspiring story, and I encourage you, I didn't know you were going to bring this up, and I don't have it by hand in my head, but I encourage you to look at what then General Eisenhower said about preserving the antiquities, not just of Italy, after all, at that point, our enemy, but also the great treasures of Germany. And what he said, and this was the orders given to the people assigned to this job, what he said is that it is our responsibility to protect in as much as is possible. So he wasn't actually asking people to sacrifice their lives or the lives of their troops, but to protect in as much as is possible these treasures because they belong to the world. They are the world's heritage. And that is, of course, true of what we see being destroyed today. But I would suggest that in fighting this battle of ideology, which you absolutely correctly say is not just the part of one group or another, but an ongoing battle, we should look to the Islamic counter-narratives, the authentic counter-narratives, which are abundant in Islamic culture. And I'll give you two examples that I know well. One is the example of Mali, specifically Timbuktu. Yes, you have to go all the way to Timbuktu for the answer of this, which I've actually done. Timbuktu, as you may know, was a great center of civilization in exactly the Renaissance period, same time as Florence and Rome and Siena and all those countries, the 14th to the 16th centuries. Timbuktu was an incredible center of Islamic learning, drawing people from all over Africa, all over the Middle East. There are approximately 300,000 manuscripts that testify to this. And in these manuscripts, you find discussions of women's rights, human rights, good governance, scientific exploration, humanistic philosophy, poetry, literature, music, everything basically you'd find in the Italian Renaissance. And this came out of the University of Timbuktu, a center of Islamic learning. I'm working on a project called the Timbuktu Renaissance, where we're working to make all of this more accessible and easily accessible online. And then today, Mali is a great center of music and has been for years. It's the root of rock and roll and the blues. Many Western artists have made a pilgrimage there to the Festival au Désert. So it's a place of plurality, diversity, acceptance, music, culture, knowledge, and it's Islamic. So I think we need to hold up these examples to give people an alternative. We just had another example right here in London. I wonder how many of you saw the production of Dara at the National Theatre. Did anyone see this? It is the first South Asian play ever produced at the National Theatre by Pakistan's leading playwright Shahid Nadim. It is the story of Dara Shikoh, the youngest son of Shah Jahan, who built the Taj Mahal. It's the story specifically of the struggle between Aurangzeb, the eldest son, and Dara. Dara was a Sufi, a mystic. He was very open to diversity. He believed that Hindus and Muslims should live together peacefully. Aurangzeb was the opposite. He was a fundamentalist and very severe in his beliefs and his actions. The two struggled for power. Aurangzeb put Dara on trial for apostasy. He was judged guilty, and his head was delivered in a box to his father, the Shah Jahan, who Aurangzeb had imprisoned. In that trial scene, which was played out beautifully in the production, you have the two strains of Islam, the extremist and the more open, moderate strain. Why is it? That's one reason, obviously, why this is so relevant today. When Shahid Nadim first tried to put this play on in Pakistan, it was premiered in 2010, the government and the Minister of Culture forbade him and said, you can't do this because it will make Aurangzeb look badly. The parliament overruled that. I mean, difficult to say. I've just written an article about this. I said it would be a little bit like saying, well, you can do a play about Henry VIII, but don't make it look as if he was unkind to women. And these things happened. So it was overruled. The play was shown in Pakistan. Despite the fact that I'm very sorry to see this, none of you saw this play, a lot of people did in London, and it is a whole reaction now is generating among particularly the Pakistani population and the Muslim population in Great Britain, and their plans now to tour it around the country. Right at this minute, there are people busy in the State Department trying to come up with a good counter-narrative. My suggestion is put that aside and look to history. You know, they don't need a counter-narrative from the United States. We need an authentic Islamic counter-narrative, and there are plenty of them, and you need to give people an alternative. If I can just say 2 quick words on civil society. We had a bit of a lively debate last night about civil society versus realpolitik. And I come down very strongly on the side of civil society, and I would suggest to all of you interested in Syria a source to look at, and I actually brought it here as a prop, but I forgot to hold it up. A fantastic book that has just been published here first with the aid of the British Council. It is called Syria Speaks. And this is a brilliant compilation of short essays, cartoons, works of art by Syrian liberals, oppositions to opponents of the regime, and of course of ISIS as well. They are, a few of them still in Syria, most of them scattered all over the world now. And they are, writing every day. They are posting online. There's a wonderful radio station, Radio Suriyali, which broadcasts into Syria and to Syrians around the world, that is keeping alive these voices of protests. And I would suggest to you that is the cultural leaders, the artists, the artist-activists, who are the canaries in the coal mine. They are the ones who tell us what people are thinking. In these authoritarian regimes that are, quote-unquote elected, the government looks very stable. But if you look to what the artists are saying, you know what the people are thinking. And that was certainly true in Egypt, which made actually the revolution quite predictable if you'd seen what any of the artists and filmmakers were saying. And finally, on the strength of civil society, right now it's easy to say, what were all these revolutions for? You've got Sisi back in Egypt, who's 100 times more repressive than Mubarak was. Looks like nothing happened. If you think that, I would suggest that you're wrong, because people's minds have changed. And there was a moment, and it will return, when fear was banished. And the only way that Sisi got into power was on the backs of a civil society movement, Tumarud, which the deep state cynically and brilliantly infiltrated and controlled. But without those young people in the street passing out leaflets, getting people mobilized into the largest street demonstration that ever took place in Egypt, bigger than any of the 18 days. Without that, Sisi never could have taken over. So, the balance, as we said last night, the people organizing these demonstrations still don't know how to organize a political party or run. But things are changing, even though the surface might look disturbingly the same.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you for that powerful contribution, and really thank you, Cynthia, very much indeed. We turn now to Dr. Lina Xiao, who is, as I say, known to many of you, Executive Vice Chairman of Asia Pacific Exchange Cooperation Foundation, and he certainly has a prominent role in the UN Religion and Cooperation Organization. He's international chairman of that organization. And Dr. Linus, thank you.
Thank you.
谢谢伊曼基金会包括老朋友 Ribal 主持这个很有意义的这个活动。
Thanks very much for inviting me to this very meaningful conference, and thanks to the Iman Foundation, and also thanks to my old friend Ribal.
从去年的会议到今天，我们发现这个世界，我们面临的这个问题不仅没得到解决，而且升级了。
So 1 year on, since we gathered here from last year, we found out actually the problems haven't solved. Actually, the things are getting worse.
那么从中东到非洲之前肯尼亚发生的问题，到突尼斯发生的问题，以致到中国发生的问题，我们在想为什么这个问题得不到解决。
So from Middle East to Africa to Kenya to Tunisia to China, we've been thinking why these problems haven't been solved.
国际社会一直在对这个问题寻求无论是政治、军事、外交的努力，到今天为止，我们看似它的作用是有限的。
Okay. The international society have been trying hard to solve the problem from the military perspective, from the political perspective, but feels like the effects have been quite limited.
那么，无论是国际社会，包括中国，都在寻求一个解决的答案。
Okay, all countries, including China, have been looking for a solution.
那么，我们可以从我们近几年做的一些事情，可以来分享给大家一个观点。
I'd like to share some opinions according to the things that we've been doing in the past few years.
首先，形成这个问题，它有深刻的历史、文化、经济和社会的因素。
First of all, I think there are lots of cultural, political, and also societal reasons for the problems to rise.
过去的10年，我们曾经做过也是类似这样的一个论坛，这个论坛叫回佛论坛，从佛教文化和伊斯兰文化来研究西部地区整个的历史文化渊源和它发生的一些变革。
10 years ago, we also had a similar forum, and that was called the Buddhism Forum. And we look at the different origins of Buddhism, Islamism, and Christianity, and to think of their impact in the West.
那么在过去几年，我们也在联合国的框架下推动了不同的宗教在进行对话，主要从价值冲突来探讨彼此之间的立场是什么。
Also, under the United Nations framework, we also have been trying to promote the inter-religious communications, so the communications between different religions, and really to understand the different positions of different religions.
那么在过去的几年，我们同样在马来西亚的吉隆坡也邀请了不同的宗教，也是从一个宗教的冲突来讲，我们今天面临的问题到底是个什么问题。
We also gathered in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, few years ago, and also to discuss what's the difference between these religions and why these differences cause conflicts.
当然，大家也都知道，中国无论是在叙利亚问题上，在伊朗的问题上，它的外交立场，我们也听到有来自于各方面的批评的声音。之所以我想中国这种立场也是源于觉得伊斯兰原教旨主义，包括伊朗的问题，包括叙利亚的问题，都有很深层次文化、历史和宗教，来自于经济层面的各种交织的因素。
Okay, I think most of you would know China's diplomatic positions with regards to Syria, and we have heard the different and also critical voices from the rest of the world. And I think the Islamic extremes have deep-seated cultural and also societal backgrounds.
也是正因为这样的一个考虑，中国在今年有2个大的举动：第一个，组建亚洲基础设施投资银行；第二，推动了一个丝绸之路计划。
Because of these considerations, China has come up with 2 initiatives recently. One is the Asia Infrastructure Investment Bank. The second is the Silk Road Initiative.
那么去年联合国也把中国提出的丝绸之路计划定为列入了联合国的文化遗产。
Last year, the United Nations have already listed China's Silk Road initiative as one of its cultural heritage.
中国试图用一种经济和文化的方式，从中国的西部地区，经过了西亚、中亚，一直到欧洲，包括到他的祖国威尼斯，再到北欧，再到今天的肯尼亚。在这样的一个经济和文化带动，人们通过一种文化、经济的融合，我们去寻找一些解决矛盾的答案。
China have been trying to use the cultural and also economic exchanges and communications and to promote understanding and to solve the origin of conflicts. So we're trying to establish this link from western part of China and through Middle East and to your hometown in Italy, Venice, and all the way up to Northern Europe. And from the other route, we're going towards Africa, including Kenya.
当然，这仅仅是在开始，我们也想是一个探索。在这个探索的过程中，非常希望在座的各位，我们来共同参与，不管以什么样的形式。
Of course, this is just the beginning, and this is also a kind of like experiment. And all of you here today are really welcome to join these efforts and to contribute whatever it means.
既然我们面临的世界的共同问题，作为中国，它就应该承担一个世界共同的责任。
As we are facing a common problem, China should also share part of the responsibility to solve the problem.
当然，我们也非常希望这样有意义的一些探讨，未来能放到中国去召开。在这个问题上，我已经给 Ribal 我们也有过一些很多交流。
I also hope the kind of communications and exchange of ideas like we are doing today can also be held in China in the future, and also have discussed these ideas with Ribal before.
谢谢大家。
Thanks very much.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Dr. Lin. It's a real honor and privilege to have a Chinese thinker of your caliber with us. We'll open the floor to questions because we've heard from all four speakers, and you're welcome to ask. Yes, sir.
I'm glad
shall we? Yes.
I'm glad, Ribal, that you made two strong points in your presentation. One of them that in our obsession in the West with ISIS, Daesh, we lose sight of the other groups that share the same ideology under different brand names. For instance, Idlib has been fallen into the hands of Jabhat al-Nusra, assisted by a huge organization, little known in the West, called Ahrar al-Sham, assisted by a small group called Jund and Allah, and also the Hazm Brigades, a group that has been supported by the Americans that give them advanced weapons, and they joined only a month ago the ranks of Jabhat al-Nusra. The other point that you made was the cynical, vicious, duplicated game that Qatar and Turkey are playing in the Middle East since the emergence of the Arab Spring. What I would like to ask you and the panelists, isn't it high time that we in the West abandoned, at least temporarily, our hostility to the regime in Damascus and team up with it in order to fight the jihadists once and for all?
Well, thank you, Xiao, for that. And yes, unfortunately, we've been warning now for the past I think 4 years that unfortunately the uprising in Syria has taken down this this road, and it has been hijacked by Islamism and by many different groups of Islamism. And as you said, should the West talk to the regime? I think it is very difficult today I think the West has already, backed down, like almost as I said yesterday, 99% was saying, at the beginning, if you all heard, we want the regime to go, this murderous regime has to leave, and now it has changed. They're saying the regime could stay, of course, because they need an ally to fight the Islamists and extremists. But on the other side, they recognize also that also some part of the regime has to take the blame for what started, or for what has started as a peaceful uprising and now has turned into this violent, I don't know even what to call it, to complete chaos. So I think to also give in completely and to tell the regime, that we are now back and we are allies and we should fight together ISIS, I think that's a bit too much, because the regime would also, this is what the regime actually wants. This is what many people think, that this is, could you imagine, all these countries, 120 countries after all this, over 250,000, almost 300,000 people have died until now, and over 700,000 injured, and millions of displaced, and another 3-4 million refugees. So to come back, and to say, sorry, you were right, and we have to work together to fight extremism. I think it's going to be a bit difficult, because the regime could have done from the beginning, from the start of the uprising, is taken some peaceful steps to allow political parties to exist, political parties to organize, allow people to contribute to freedom of expression, freedom of association, and all of that. And they did not want that, and this is what has led to the Islamist hijacking the revolution and the uprising, as I said, because there are other countries in the area who do not want to see a genuine democratic change in Syria, because that would threaten their own existence. So to be honest, we are in a very difficult situation today. We have to find a solution. At least the international community have to come together, as I said, with Russia, China, the United States, England, France, and to work together. Because as long as there are differences, as long as we are fighting in proxy wars in different countries and other areas, and as long as there are perceptions of alliances and of threats coming from Southeast Asia, the Pacific. And to the former Soviet countries, I think this is going to still create this rift with having two alliances, as I said, between Russia, China backing one side, and the United States and other Western countries backing the other. And this never going to resolve the problem, because it's going to continue to be a proxy war, and this never going to lead to a solution that we all hope for in Syria. Today, to think that we're going to have the peaceful, the perfect democracies that we were wishing for at the start of the uprising, I think it's going to be very difficult. We have to admit that things have completely shifted, away, and now what we have to do first is that we have to try to keep the country together. I always tell people the priorities of people have changed at the beginning of the uprising. Everybody in Syria, in the Arab world, and around the world want a better life. They want a change. They want democracies, because it's not that it's perfect, but it's the best model that has been until today in any country that has been proven to work. So of course we wished for that, but today people's priorities have changed. People's priorities, for example, in Syria, people are looking for food, people are looking for electricity, people are looking for heating, people are just looking to go back home. A lot of it amazes me that some people, for example, some politicians in Lebanon were astonished that a lot of people came out the streets, and when there was elections, quote unquote, elections that were taking place in Syria, and people went and by thousands and thousands to vote for Bashar in Lebanon, and people were shocked. Why were you shocked? I always tell them, and they thought that they are traitors and that they received them. I always tell them, but it's not exactly like you were giving them a better life in Lebanon. You put them in tents with no heating, no food. People from many elderly people from the Gulf, a lot of stories from the United Nations, others saying that people coming from the Gulf countries to buy young girls for $200-300, minors, and this is horrible. So people just want to go back to at least security. want to go back to at least dignity, which this was the first thing that they raised during the uprising in Syria. So they don't see that dignity being given to them today. Thank you.
Thank you, Ribal. We are running over time, so what we're going to do, we're going to add, Cynthia I know wants to come in on that question, but we'll bring in another question so she can come in on two, so we can keep the ball rolling.
Maybe
rather.
take two
Yes, or we could
questions,
take two questions indeed. Yes.
Sharifi, founder of liberalmuslim.org, the new website for Muslims, former Iraqi diplomat. Would like to thank Williams and Ribal and everybody, please. And I would like to link this conference to last year's conference, of course, and we're so impressed with the speeches which we had last year and the inspiration we got from our friend Mr. Xiao Wunan and the role of China with that. But we came this year, I think I attended, I don't know, hundreds or thousands of conference, and just meeting people and exchanging cards and good food and wine, of course, and first class travel tickets and clapping. So we didn't achieve anything. So from last year, my personal experience, I really benefited quite a lot from last year's conference. So the West in general, they deal always with the top. They never go to the roots of the problem. So the problem is, which I mentioned last time, is the verses in the Holy Quran. For example, 96 words of kill, it's mentioned in the Quran. 25 of kill those people, which is more dangerous. Love, 0 words for love towards others. So what I'm saying is, we need to interpret the right interpretation of the Holy Quran for the Muslims to suit the ongoing century now. So I started that, and I put it in front of you, and we are translating that site from, at the moment it's in Arabic. I put it in Google 2 months ago, 3 months ago. So thousands of Arab people coming into it. And of course, we want to translate it to Chinese, to Urdu, to English, of course, the first language. And of course, I was impressed with our Italian friends, and I was impressed that Italy is going deep into the roots of the problems. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
We'll take one more question from this gentleman over here before we let Cynthia come in.
My name is Rhys Coker. I'm a psychologist and a youth worker. I think there's an awful lot of talk at an international level, which is great, and that's important. But I think the problem is kind of sneaking up at us, and it's from within the communities. When our young people decide to strap devices to themselves, or they decide to fly off overseas and support a cause, which is involving themselves in terrorism. And I think the problem starts in the communities, in the families themselves, where there are an awful lot of good people, good Muslim people that seem to live a very, very good life and say hello to their neighbours. And for those of you that speak Urdu or Punjabi, they may say hello to me, but actually behind closed doors they see me as a harami, ganda gora, for those of you that understand what that is. I've experienced this firsthand myself when I tried to marry into this society where these particular people, all very, very good until you try to marry their daughter. And then of course it changes massively, and they're no longer the liberal Muslims that they appear to be. They're now following a completely different doctrine, which is more akin to the extreme version. And unfortunately this is happening. If you look at what the youngsters are taught behind the closed doors of their houses, it's things such as stay away from those white people, they are terrible, the shaitan goes with them. They'll eat anything, they'll eat pork, they'll devour your insides, all of that kind of demonization. And yet these people will still go to school, these youngsters will still communicate, but actually from the inside out they're starting to feel these things. You see them clicking together, you see them moving in their own groups, and at some point they're turned, and then it all goes wrong. And I think that's what's happening in our homes, in our societies, and that's the problem that we need to fix before it really kind of rots things from the inside out, if that makes sense. And as I say, I experienced that firsthand. I work with some of these youngsters to try to de-radicalize them. I've experienced it myself firsthand, trying to marry into that culture. This is kind of to the panel. Whoever wants to pick that up, and run with that little hand grenade I threw.
Thank you. We'll doubtless that's very controversial, I hope. Anyway, we'll let Cynthia come back on these questions. We'll take the whole panel will get a chance to respond to all and any of your questions as we move down the line. But Cynthia,
just quickly on all the questions. Thank you for these interesting questions. First, on whether the U.S. should be pragmatic. I think some people would say practice realpolitik and support Assad. Yeah, my friend is nodding. And you know that I'm going to say absolutely not. I think it would be a catastrophic mistake. Why would we support one violent brute to, eliminate another violent brute? And we know that Assad is cynically jumping on the backs of ISIS to Bashar. Oh, sorry, Bashar. Oh, sorry. Well, I don't know him that well. We know that he's jumping on the back of ISIS to bomb his own people, and pretending that that's ISIS doing that. For the United States to lose, first of all, I don't even see what it would gain, and my belief is that the United States power in the world, sure, we have the strongest military and we will always have the strongest military. I hope we do. But how well is that working out for us? How often do we succeed militarily lately? The United States power in the world is very significantly also the power of example. President Clinton famously said, people are more impressed by the power of our example than the example of our power. I think we've been falling rather short on the power of our example lately, but to go over and support Bashar al-Assad, I think, would be catastrophic and gain nothing. And I just won't even go into what he's done to his people. We all know. And I hope that decision will never be made. Notwithstanding the fact that, of course, it was, as you suggested, a terrible mistake that we didn't support the opposition in the beginning. So there's no question about that. And if you look at the books that are coming out by Hillary Clinton, Gates, Panetta, they all advise President Obama to do just that. And it's a fascinating thing that somebody with so little foreign policy experience said no to all these people with such vast experience. But, sadly, the results are catastrophic, less for us than for the Syrians. Just to your point, I can't agree with your interpretation of the Quran, but I don't think we should go into a great long thing about the interpretation of the Quran right now. Rather, I would just underscore my point that I think what needs to go forward, rather than an esoteric discussion of what the Quran means, are convincing narratives that emphasize the more open, pluralistic, compassionate dimensions of the Quran, such as those I suggested coming out of Mali or Darashiko, but there are many, many of them. And actually, to your point about youth being turned, there also are incredible debates going on largely online now, mostly in Arabic. I do not speak Arabic. I get this from my Arabic-speaking friends, that display an incredible amount of critical thinking, which is, of course, the element missing from your story. And they are young people debating exactly what you talked about. Can there be democracy in the Arab world? What does the Quran say? Is this Islam? Is it not? What do we want with our lives? These debates are going on. They're attracting thousands and thousands of people. So this is part of the slow change taking place. And I think what is so needed is exactly that kind of critical thinking, which has no part in Arab education, sadly, which is largely done by rote. So this is a change that will take time. And it's not going to happen immediately, but it is slowly happening. And education, as you suggested last night, is key.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Cynthia. We're going to pass the microphone down, but we'll let Shafiq introduce yourself, please, Shafiq. Just to add one more question to the mix, and then we'll...
I appreciate, I think, what has been provided for us by way of information, and agree with the lady. Of course, we need to have a counter-narrative which is going to be something which people can actually believe in and accept. We can't have just a narrative of just bombs, which is what we talk about on the newspapers and all the time, because we pick up the problem but it's already become quite sort of serious. Now, the real sort of issues that are in the Middle East are two. One is Saudi Arabia, the other one is Israel. Saudi Arabia, to our friends' point about preserving the heritage, they are destroying it even as we speak now. They're a friendly power. The old history of Islam, the monuments, they're all disappearing because the new buildings are coming up. Now that's something that, being a friendly power, I think we should be able to influence. Then, of course, going into the other sort of enemy territory or the difficult areas, and to preserve that, I think is very laudable. I think I would support you very much in that. Israel, of course, is the perennial problem over that region. It's a festering sore. Nothing seems to be done, and yet we have something which is coming out, which is going to upset the whole Muslim world, not only the Muslim world, but the whole world. So if we are not going to be courageous enough to be able to face the issue at the level that it matters, then I don't think we are going to be talking. We'll be talking like this about somebody, the blow-by-blow account of what's happening there in the Middle East. I think we've got to step back and look at the real issues that are there and be able to resolve them in some meaningful fashion. Otherwise, we'll be sort of, the counter-narrative, the narratives that we seem to be given is even going back to the Vietnam, that if we don't step in there and fight the Chinese or the Vietnamese, then the whole domino effect is going to sort of take over the world, or whatever the narrative was at that time. Now we've got another sort of narrative, which is Iran, if they get the bomb, then of course the whole of the Middle East is going to get the bomb. I mean, these false types of choices that have been presented to us to swallow, I think people are smart enough to be able to see that. This is just not acceptable. We've got to be talking a real thing, and I think the lady is talking a very real language here. You've got to be able to talk something that's acceptable to the Muslim world, and not only the Muslim world, to the rest of the world as well.
Thank you, Shafiq. We'll ask Francesco to come in on that and on any of the questions thus far.
No, to be very quick, because I think we have to speed our conversation. I thank you all. I thank you, our host, and you all. No, I would like to. I share what Cynthia said, and of course, when you have a non-democratic and brutal regime, and if you have both the power and the legitimacy to intervene, of course, you got to be prepared about what happens after. I think that is the lesson of the last years. Because when we had the Libya intervention, the Security Council passed a resolution where for the first time we read about the responsibility to protect. So it was among the reasons for that military intervention to chase and have Gaddafi killed. He was already off, let's say, but it was a decision by the international community based also on this principle. Since then, I would not say that that principle vanished, what we maybe called democratic intervention or interventionism, or more accurately, responsibility to protect. Democratic in the sense of the democracies and a democratic international community. But of course, something changed since this historical moment, and frankly, I don't see in the international community today the will to intervene according to principle, knowing that you are not going to be consistent with the decision, the military decision you take. And I think that what's happening in Libya is quite explaining for that, with total chaos. You've been there. You know the huge difficulty to gather the different positions and to find a national unity on a compromise between two main and the other actors. So my worried observation is that today the international community has a very different opinion, and maybe also the US administration. Also because we see that when the Daesh and the Islamic State military conquered Mosul, made it also through armaments that were stealed from the furniture from the West, due to an absence of a military organized structure opposing efficiently IS. So it is just a small observation I would like to add while sharing your views.
Thank you. I know, Francis, you'd like to come back, but let's just, Dr. Linus, come in on this, and because and maybe address also the question, Ribal's point about Russia and China being closer allied. I was noted that, and I was interested to get your reaction to that closer alliance between Russia and China.
在讲就是说也可以回答前面的问题，但是刚刚 Ribal 提到的就是中国和俄罗斯之间的问题。中国跟俄罗斯现在就是这个好像是建立更加紧密的这种合作伙伴关系，也希望你们刚刚一起回答关于这个问题。
好，谢谢。中国和俄罗斯关系从外界读解来讲，那么认为这几年无论是在经济、区域反恐，包括文化方面，这种关系走向越来越紧密。
From international perspective, I know people understand China and Russia are coming closer in the areas of regional counter-terrorism and also regional economic relations.
无论是从上海合作组，还是独联体的一个协调机制，还是从中俄本身在区域反恐的合作，那么我们相信为这个地区都能解决恐怖主义的这种合作能够发挥一个积极作用。
I think the cooperation between China and Russia would contribute to the regional stability because if you look at some of the agreements and some of the cooperations established through Shanghai Cooperation Organization and also the regional counter-terrorism agreements between these two countries.
但有一点可以肯定是，中国和俄罗斯它不是盟国，它仅仅在一些重大国际问题上是在加强合作，它不是在结盟。
One point I think is worth mentioning, that is China and Russia are not allied countries. The cooperation between these two countries, which means these countries like to work closer on major international issues, but these two countries are not allied countries.
包括在有些问题上，彼此立场也不是一致的，如同今天的乌克兰问题。
There are also major differences in terms of some of the major issues between these two countries on international issues, for instance, like Ukraine. So there are also differences between these two countries.
中国更愿意建立一个广泛的国际合作来解决目前我们面临的恐怖主义，因为恐怖主义无论是从多边还是双边来讲，都不是一个局部的问题，而是个全局的问题。
China strives to establish international cooperation which is more comprehensive and more broad with regards to international cooperation and relations, because terrorism is not regional issue, it's a global issue.
那么在这些问题上，我们也非常希望给在座的各位探讨，就是如何在面对恐怖主义问题上加强不同国家、不同民族的相互的合作。
So I like to discuss and explore the possibilities of working together with all of you here and to come up with solutions and to see how to solve the problems between different religions, different countries and different cultures.
谢谢。
Thank you.
We are overrunning massively, but there'll be another panel. You could come in on a question on the next panel. Yeah, there will be another panel in a moment. You'll be able to come in because we are massively overrunning. I know, Cynthia, very brief. Yes.
Just for all of you advocates of the U.S. supporting Bashar al-Assad, we do have a history of supporting brutal dictators, and so far it has worked out really well. Iran, Congo, all over Latin America. So we might look to history there.
Dan, you wanted one last word?
No,
We're all right.
absolutely, I agree.
On that note, there will be another panel that follows straight after this one. But thank you very much indeed, and thank you for that fascinating discussion. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bless you.
Thank you so much.